Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Studio Albums Ranked. Today we're going to be looking at the wonderful 80s pop duo Eurythmics. Eurythmics, of course, Annie Lennox on vocals and keyboards and occasional flute. David A. Stewart on guitars, keyboards, various other instruments, programming and production. They were originally in the 70s in a band called the Tourists. They didn't write a lot of the songs in the Tourists. The Tourists were mostly led by a guy called Pete Coombs. When the Tourists broke up, Annie and Dave decided to go off together and do Eurythmics just as a duo. They would involve other musicians as they went along, but the band would be just the two of them, and they would write the songs together. And they would go throughout the 80s, break up at the end of the 80s, and then come back and do one album at the end of the 90s. So we're going to be looking at 9 albums in total. There were 8 studio albums, plus they did do a soundtrack album, which I am including in this list. So let's get into it and start with my number 9. And my number 9 is going to be the comeback album they did in 1999, and that is Peace. This is quite a good album. I just don't feel like it quite recaptures the magic for me. But that's just me. I mean, it does have I Saved the World Today, which is a song I've always quite liked. Peace is Just a Word. Beautiful Child. But on the whole, I find this album a little bit mellow. Yeah, it's a good album. It's not a great album. That's my personal opinion, and that's why I'm putting it at number 9. My number 8 is going to be their album from 1989, which was the last album they did before the original breakup, and that is We Two Are One. Again, I feel like this album's a little on the mellow side, probably why I rank it a little lower. The title track's really good though, King and Queen of America. Again, has that mellow feel, but it's a good song. I quite like it. Revival, that's a good up-tempo song. When the Day Goes Down, How Long. There's some really good songs on this album, but I just like some of these other albums better. The rest of this I really feel is the cream of the Eurythmics crop. So even though these next albums are going to be ranked 7, 6 and so on, don't get the impression that I don't like these albums, because I think these albums are great. My number 7 is going to be their album from 1986, and that is Revenge. This was the second of their sort of rock and roll albums. They sort of went through a rock phase after sort of the early synth pop that they did. This has Missionary Man, Thorn in My Side, When Tomorrow Comes, all big hits, and The Miracle of Love. The only problem I have with this album is it's very front loaded. You have all those songs on side 1, and then side 2, the songs aren't quite as good as the songs on side 1, but you still have Let's Go and Take Your Pain Away and In Your Town. There's still some good songs on side 2, but it is very front loaded with all the hits on side 1. Good album though, really like that one. My number 6 is going to be the soundtrack album they did in 1984, which is rather appropriately called 1984, For the Love of Big Brother, from the movie of the same name starring John Hurt. It works very well as a soundtrack. There's only a couple of sort of proper songs as such on the album. You've got Sex Crime 1984, which was a big hit for them. I really love that song. Julia is a really good song too. And then you get sort of more moody instrumental with bits of vocal pieces. Things like For the Love of Big Brother, Winston's Diary, Room 101. It works really well as a soundtrack, although I believe that the director of the film wasn't particularly fond of the Eurythmics soundtrack for this album and commissioned a different soundtrack for it. So you can find versions of this movie on DVD that have either or soundtrack. But I think it's a good soundtrack album, I really do. My number 5 is going to be their album from 1987, and that is Savage. This is quite an odd little album. This comes after sort of their 2 rock albums. It sees them going back more towards electronic music, but not completely. But it also sees them going back to a sort of an experimentalism that they hadn't had since some of the very early days as well, I think. It had, the singles were Beethoven, I Love to Listen To, and I Need a Man. But there's other really good songs on this album, like I've Got a Lover Back in Japan and You Placed a Chill in My Heart, the title track Savage, I Need You, Heaven. I like this album. This album didn't do as well as the previous couple of albums, but I think it's a really good album, and I really quite like it. My number 4 is going to be the first of their sort of rock albums, and that is 1985's Be Yourself Tonight. I mean, this has classic songs on it like Would I Lie to You and There Must Be an Angel, which shows that they still had a foot in the sort of the electronic music camp. Has There Must Be an Angel also has a wonderful harmonica solo from the great Stevie Wonder. I Love You Like a Ball and Chain. Sisters are doing it for themselves. The duet with Aretha Franklin, that's wonderful stuff. Again, this album's a little front-loaded, but it does have some big songs on side 2 as well, like It's Alright, Baby's Coming Back. There's Here Comes That Sinking Feeling, Better to Have Loved and Lost Than Never Have Loved at All. And then you have Adrian, which is the duet that they did with Elvis Costello. Really good album. One of my favourites. My number 3 is going to be their debut album from 1981 that a lot of people don't talk about, and that is In the Garden. And this came out before they had any success. This album really didn't do anything. Produced by Conny Plank, the great German producer. Recorded with him. This definitely has a sort of a krautrocky kind of feel to it, which I rather like. Doesn't sound like anything else in the Eurythmics catalogue, and I like that. I really like the sound of this album. English Summer is wonderful. Take Me to Your Heart, She's Invisible Now, Your Time Will Come, Caveman Head, Never Gonna Cry Again, Sing Sing. There's really good songs on this album. Love this album a lot, and I really feel like this album needs to get more attention from people who might know the Eurythmics for the hits and whatever. Go and seek this album out and have a listen, because it's quite different from anything else in their catalogue, and I think it's a really good album. My number 2 is probably going to be a lot of people's number 1. It's the first of 2 albums they did in 1983, and that is their breakthrough album, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Yeah, I mean, you know, this had the title track, which was a huge hit for them. It's got Love Is a Stranger, which is probably a song I love even better. It has This City Never Sleeps, Jennifer, Somebody Told Me, This Is the House, I've Got an Angel. It has a cover of Wrap It Up. I Could Give You a Mirror. Really good album. Wonderful early 80s electronic music. I don't even like to call it synth pop really, because I think it's a little more substantial than that. There's still a bit of an experimental edge to this. It's really, really wonderful electronic music. As is my number 1, which is their second album from 1983, and that is Touch. This is my favourite Eurythmics album. I mean, it has, just look at the hits on this album. You have Here Comes the Rain Again, Right by Your Side, and Who's That Girl? Three of my favourite Eurythmics songs. But you've also got Regrets, you've also got The First Cut, you've also got No Fear, No Hate, No Pain, Paint a Rumour. Just wonderful early to mid 80s electronic music of the highest order. Just a terrific album. So that's my Eurythmics ranking. We'll go through it again from the top. My number 1 is Touch. My number 2 is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. My number 3 is In the Garden. My number 4 is Be Yourself Tonight. My number 5 is Savage. My number 6 is 1984, For the Love of Big Brother. My number 7 is Revenge. My number 8 is We Two Are One. And my number 9, still a good album and still worth seeking out, is their comeback album Peace from 1999. So that's my Eurythmics ranking. I'd love to know in the comments what your Eurythmics rankings would be, if you want to rank the whole catalogue, if you want to just give me your top 5 or your top 3. Tell me where you agree with my ranking, tell me where you disagree with my ranking. Let me know what your favourite Eurythmics songs are. I'd love to hear it in the comments. I love reading the comments. Always try to read every comment, give it a heart and reply where there's something to reply to. Thank you for everybody who does. Thank you for everybody who likes, shares and subscribes. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have a ton of other studio albums ranked shows covering a really wide range of music. So I have a playlist for everything. So there's a playlist for my studio albums ranked shows. There's a playlist for my favorite albums of all time. Playlist for my anniversary album shows. Playlist for my In Defense Of shows, etc., etc. So yeah, have a look. There's plenty to explore on the channel. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I'm mostly posting the records I happen to be listening to at the time, as well as posting channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, or I am trying to give that more of a music focus, and you can also see my absolutely terrible Wordle scores there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.